Hey there, emerging expat. You're tuned in to Let's Move to Portugal. I'm Victoria from Expats Everywhere's podcast, and I have the distinct honor of bringing you, YouTube travelers, and our resident of Portugal experts, Expats Everywhere's Josh and Kalie. Each week they'll inspire, they'll educate, and they'll accompany you on your journey to Portuguese residency. This week on Let's Move to Portugal,
Kalie and Dallas discussed important, yet widely overlooked, aspects of moving abroad, including managing residency changes, estate planning, and banking considerations.
Hey, expats and travelers alike. Welcome back to the Expats Everywhere Presents Let's Move to Portugal podcast. Really excited to be here with you. Kalie, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing fantastically well. My brain is completely switched on to have this chat with you and chat with the audience.
As opposed to other days when it's not switched on?
A bit foggy. I mean, look, the weather here in Porto, I assume like other parts of the country, we've been battered on the coast with a bit of a storm.
Yeah.
So a little storm system has rolled through. But I mean, let's be honest, the winter here has been very mild this year so far.
It has. It's been nice. So a little rain now and then, not a big deal.
Not a huge problem.
Yeah. And it's not cold either. That's the other thing. At least it's not like cold, because we were in London a couple weeks ago and it wasn't raining, but it was cloudy and it was so cold. So I think some places are getting hit with that, so it's not nice if it's cold and raining. So at least here it's not cold. It's just kind of rainy.
Well, we were also in Belgium, and we were in both Antwerp and Brussels, and it basically rained the whole time we were there, and it was cold.
It was cold. Yeah.
And our friends that live here in Porto were like, it's sunny here. It's 55, 60 degrees, whatever, 65 some days.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really nice. So we did miss some of those days, but no, it's been fine. So let's chat a bit about what has been going on with the channel and what's been going on kind of in the sphere of Expats Everywhere before sliding into the interview that you've done with Dallas. It's not really an interview, is it?
It's more a conversation, a chat, like kind of sharing resources and information. That'll be helpful, but we'll get to that in a second as to what he and I talk about. But first, I guess the big thing going on right now on the channel is we had a really great interview with Christina, who lives in Coimbra. So that was fun because obviously we've been to Coimbra several times. We've done a city guide, but getting some updated information from expats who actually live there, what's going on now as opposed to a couple of years ago. Yeah. So it was updated and really good information from her about why they chose Coimbra. Why they chose Coimbra.
And we also had Christina's husband, Christopher, on the podcast just last week. And we had that episode out to you all before actually her interview came out. So those two are kind of going hand in hand. We're trying to get more people from the main YouTube channel that want to know a little more of the minutia of what it's like living here in Portugal and moving to Portugal over to this channel, this outlet, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're just listening on one of the podcast platforms, because we find, and we're having a lot of fun with this, we find that it's great to be able to talk for 35, 40, 45 minutes with someone about their experience versus having to condense an interview down into what's more digestible for the main YouTube audience.
Yeah. I mean, on the podcast, people can really open up about experiences and stories and everything. That's just a little harder to do that on YouTube because, like you said, they have to be shorter. So we can really do the longer format on the podcast, which we really like. So kind of doing a little bit of both is nice, which we're actually going to do with this upcoming, I talked with Dallas today. We're also going to have a video out on YouTube that's a shorter version of this with some other info as well. So kind of going hand in hand too.
Yeah. Those of you who have been keeping up with our real estate project, we have been doing a real estate project here in Portugal, in Porto, and things are going well with that. We had the approval on Monday to put up the construction walls, barrier, perimeter around the facade of the property, and the first floor of the facade has been removed. We got approvals to bring the facade down because it was causing issues to the neighboring buildings. And just being a general nuisance. So we've got that down. We got the first floor down. It took basically 2 days.
It was fast.
And then we expect this week it will be completely removed. And then the front third of the property, the excavation and demolition of that area will be finalized. So then it's just new construction from there.
Yeah. What's really funny is we had this big debate on what do we call those metal walls with construction that you Yeah, they have to put up, because if not, there obviously would just be an opening straight into like the construction area. So,
Yeah. Well, I didn't grow up in a city, so I never had that point of reference to even use whatever that is. It's not scaffolding. Scaffolding's different, right? Scaffolding,
you
in a
use
way,
to climb up and move around and stuff, right?
and not only that, but you'll have scaffolding that will possibly protect the upper outside, but still allow people to pass on through below.
Right.
And I've seen that in plenty of cities, like traveling in New York, for example. I would see that. But
you see that here too. But it's different than what we're talking about.
I'm just saying, like, growing up in a more rural area or, a smaller town, you generally have houses that you don't put up a barrier, a wall around.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So it's like these metal walls.
If you know the word for that, you let us know.
Well, we tried to look it up, and it was like, none of this seems to apply to actually what we're talking about.
I guess I didn't define it well enough for Google. Maybe I need to have a conversation with ChatGPT. I just haven't done that yet.
But anyway, so that's happening. So moving right along there, which is nice.
Yeah, it is nice. And then, we put out a video about Toulouse. We did a city guide there. We have another city guide that was on Expats Everywhere Explorers. And then we have another city guide coming up in the coming weeks for Rio Tinto, which is more like a town guide. So
yeah, definitely more of a town guide.
Yeah. So, or a neighborhood of Porto even.
But then
some people
also
might consider
too, in speaking about that, like some of the city guides, obviously we do city guides all around Portugal, but then we're doing like city guides and country guides in different parts of Europe too, which is fun. And we were in Luxembourg a couple of years ago. We've been talking about we should go back. So we finally booked something.
I'm super excited.
Yeah, but that'll be later on in March. I think we booked that, but we can do an updated country guide because we did Luxembourg City while we were there.
Yeah.
So we'll do an updated one of that because that was a fun one and a great little place to visit.
Yeah, and that one's not really going to be vacation, although we have fun everywhere we go. But we're definitely going there with the intent to film and get content out to you. So we're pumped about that.
Yeah, Josh has been talking about going back for years, so it finally happened. We finally booked something.
Yeah, we're not staying at a fancy hotel, unfortunately, just because we'll probably be out so much doing work.
Yeah,
but yeah. We have an announcement about a meetup coming up. It's February 10th.
Yes.
Can you give us more details about
February
that?
10th at Fino Golf Club, which is in Matosinhos. And it starts at 5:30 as usual. Our open meetups are come and go as you please. So it's very casual, no RSVP or anything. So just show up. Starting at 5:30, we'll be there and hanging out, building community, connecting with people. So if you're in the area, the Porto area, or, greater Porto area, obviously we have people who come from like Braga, Guimarães. And so if you're up in the north or want to come from Lisbon, you're welcome. Anyone's welcome.
Or Algarve.
Come from anywhere. Listen, you don't have to live here. You don't have to.
If you're on planet Earth, let's go.
Yeah. If you just happen to be here for like a scouting trip during that time or on vacation during that time, then you're definitely welcome. It's not just like if you live here already or anything. It's very open. So very casual.
Yeah. In general, I think between 10 and 25% of the people that I meet, at least at the meetups, will be just on a scouting trip. They're passing through. They haven't actually moved to Portugal yet. So it's really cool.
Yeah, great to connect and chat with people.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Ask questions and stuff of people who already live here. So it's good.
And if you're not familiar with Fino Golf Club, that is owned by an American couple. We had Tam on the podcast. I want to say it was season 2. So I will put a link in the show notes or the description section to that one if you want to hear from him, because we actually talk quite a bit about the food and beverage scene here in Portugal and just what's happening. So yeah.
And that's a good place because obviously February, you don't know what the weather's going to be like. So it'll be completely inside. And then of course, coming into like the spring and summer, we'll do more outdoor venues, which is nice to
which
enjoy.
I'm excited about as well.
Enjoy. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us about this conversation that you had with Dallas.
Yeah. So essentially the idea of like getting him on the podcast was he and I constantly talk about things that people don't think to ask. Like, what do I need to do before I move? Or, I'm already over abroad. It doesn't even have to be Portugal. It's just abroad. And I didn't think about this. So how can I get this done now? So it's all these little things like, you don't know what you don't know, right? That saying. So it's like, we talk about these things that we're seeing with friends, clients who don't know certain things and they don't know they need to do this, and they don't know like how much time they need to give themselves. Because sometimes some of these things, they seem so small that it's like the last week or 2 weeks before you go and you think, oh, I need to do this. And then that gets you into a bit of a bind, because then maybe you don't get the package or service you actually want because you just try to get it done quickly and you end up spending more money, or it's not as trustworthy. So we talk about these different things that you should think about before you move. Again, move abroad. It's not even just Portugal specific. It's just moving abroad. Solutions to these things that you need to do, like lots of different options of what you can do. And then if
resources. And
if you've already moved, now what? What can you do in hindsight?
So I actually wasn't a part of this interview. So I'm curious to know, is this
what they are?
No. Is this complimentary or supplementary to the video that we shot that's going out on Saturday?
So it's different in the sense that, obviously, like we talked about before, the YouTube video will be more concise, a little quicker pace.
Sure. It's like
it has to be. Yeah.
And it's like
angle changes and stuff.
And it's more highly edited.
Right. So you
did a good job on that video, by the way.
Thanks.
I hope the editing does it justice.
Off in it, yeah.
It does
actually
it
a lot of work.
The way we wanted it to be presented.
Well, see, that's the thing with me. Since I'm not very
we shot
artsy.
A different shot.
Well, since I'm not like artsy, I have something in my head. I'm like the Pinterest fail person. I have it in my head, and I'm like, this is what it should look like, and it like never comes off like how it should look.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that, I guess I would say, I bring up a few different points in that video that we don't address. But some of the ones that we talk about in the YouTube video, we unpack even more and give more resources and more options. Because in the video, it has to be kind of quick. Like, think about this. Here are a couple, companies or apps that you can use, but you can't really go through it all, right?
Yeah.
So if that one's like a bit of a snippet with some other, they're different. I don't know how to say it.
Okay.
They are different. So it would be good to see
they're different,
both.
but I'm asking if it's complementary or supplementary. Like, does one complement the other? Or does this podcast help
add more to? I think it may be complimentary. I don't know. I guess you could say. You know what? I guess listener,
you be the judge. You let us know. What do you think?
It could be both, but maybe they complement each other. But it could be both. So So listener, go ahead and check out both, and then you let us know what you think. Complimentary or supplementary?
Let's get on to the interview.
Okay, let's go.
All right, but before we do that, let's talk about this week's sponsor, Green Ocean Global Advisors.
Yes, we always recommend, no matter where you are in the moving process, to get your finances in order. So that's in your home country and then the country that you're moving to.
And speaking about homes, what if you sell your house before leaving or do it after? What are the capital gains implications like? Well, a financial advisor will be able to walk you through this type of thing.
And what about distributions? Maybe you have a 401k or a pension and you need to figure out how much you should be drawing from for the lifestyle that you're going to have.
Now, you can use this link in the description section below to talk to John from Green Ocean Global Advisors to see if he's a fit for you. You'll have a free 15-minute consultation just for being an Expats Everywhere listener. So you can use that to get your free 15 minutes. Click the link in the description section below. Now, on to the show.
Dallas, I am really excited to talk to you today because you and I have both been in Portugal for quite a long time. We've seen a lot of things, right? We've helped people. We've seen the good, the bad. We've helped guide people through things that they didn't even know that they needed.
Right.
Honestly, one thing I get a lot on consultations when people ask, like, they go through their list of questions, and then a lot of people at the end will be like, what do I not know? Like, what am I missing here? Which I think is a great question to ask, but I get asked that a lot. Mm-hmm. And so the cool thing is you get asked that a lot as well. And so today we're going to unpack some of the common things that people just don't know that they need to do before they leave. Or also if you're a listener, if you already left, moved to Portugal or moved abroad, because these are actually good for anywhere abroad.
They're everywhere, universal now.
Yeah, exactly. So if you haven't done these things, solutions to how to do them, even if you've already moved, but the good thing would be to do before you go, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hear a lot. What? Tell me what I don't know, or I don't know what I don't. I don't know what to ask because I don't know what to ask. That's kind of like that. The Donald Rumsfeld kind of meme. If you know what that is, look it up. The known unknowns, the known knowns, and the unknown unknowns. Blah blah blah. That's a lot of what questions that are asked.
Yeah, which is good because, if you kind of think, all right, I have everything, I've checked everything off my list. If you've not moved abroad, or even if you're just going to a new country, because it changes depending on countries, there are things that are good to know before going and do before going. So we're also going to do a YouTube video about this to unpack a few different things, and they'll kind of coincide. So we've got some different ones on the channel, different ones on here, some good information that'll connect. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the common things that you see.
Sure. Okay. Well, I think back up a little bit. Like you said in the beginning, I've been international for about 7 years, maybe a little longer. And so I personally have my own list, and from my own personal experiences and so forth, working as Lusitano Dreams, a lot of people coming into Portugal, working with them and kind of sharing them my experiences and reiterating those with them, and then learning from their experiences and their recap of what they should have done different. I always ask that, if you could do it over again, what would you do different? What would you bring? What would you strategize different? So I always do those recaps with people. But what really has expanded my understanding and my knowledge is this with World Post, with providing virtual mail services to people in the United States. I am dealing with people that are moving to Mexico, all throughout Europe, Asia, and I'm learning that there's some consistencies with all of these people that are confirming what I've always kind of teach and preach with people moving to Portugal. So that's what I'd like to share today.
Okay, great. So my question with you about World Post is, did you start that business out of the necessity from seeing from people they didn't have it, or had you had the business and now it's just growing for people internationally?
I started World Post because that necessity is the mother of invention. I was really having a hard time finding a good, reputable mail service that I thought people needed when they move international. So and rather than continuing to work with these crappy services, I just decided to create my own. I saw an opportunity and a need for a good service, and based out of South Dakota, because I'm long on South Dakota as being a strong U.S. strategy for residency as you move abroad.
Yeah, which I want to talk about that. So don't let me forget about that, the South Dakota thing. But let's talk about World Post and virtual mailboxes, because I think, people are in different scenarios when they move. Some people sell their home and they just don't have an address. Some people keep their home because it's a rental, but maybe they don't, since it's going to be a rental, maybe they don't want mail going there. Some people will use a family member's address, friends. So there's lots of different options. But I think that when you're moving abroad, you kind of don't think, I need to change my address on my, my bank, my credit cards, my whatever it might be, especially if you are cutting everything loose and you don't have your own home. So it's something that's definitely best to do before you go. So what's the process, I guess, what kind of clients do you see get virtual mailboxes? Is it a whole mix?
Yes, it's a whole mix. I see and hear a lot of people are when they're looking at moving to Portugal, let's talk about the Lusitano clients. I talk, of course, because I'm going to pitch my service that I provide. And they're like, my neighbor's going to collect my mail for, I'm keeping my house as a rental, and my neighbor's going to collect my mail for me and take care of it. I've had situations where they say, oh, you know what? I have my mail all forwarded to my friend, and I do, what's the USPS does this, you can see what mail's coming to your house. And I just look at all her mail and I tell her what mail is mine, and I have her open things that need to be open. So I hear a lot of these stories, and I'm like, I think it's kind of crazy that people rely on friends and family for their mail. And another thing I see a lot of, almost every day this, when people are onboarding, they say this, well, I don't get any mail. I'll get nothing. I'll get nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, let's see how that works. So they get the lowest, cheapest plan. And next thing you know, it's like they're getting tax, pins for their IRS. They're getting tax notices, just general stuff. They're getting, I get a lot of the toll. They get tracked down by some toll, state toll service or bridge tolls, and they're getting notices, vehicle notices for their warranty that are legit. There's the scammy ones, but there's the legit ones for warranties. And all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, I get a lot more mail than I realize. And so that's really important for people to understand as well. But so what I see a lot of the people that actually come into World Post that understand that they need virtual mail and stuff, I think it's a huge mix, but most of them have already been dealing with mail services. They know what they want and they know what they don't want. So they're coming to World Post to see, how we can be different or are different than a lot of those other services.
Okay, so what's the process for someone like if they are moving abroad and they want to do a virtual mailbox? Like, how do you set that up and how do you choose and everything?
Right. So the biggest thing is it's really hard for people to do the analysis. There's so many different services out there and how they're and that's a really that could be a whole different episode. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on that, but so many different services have different ways that they've created. It's either they own the entire service, they own the platform, the digital platform. They maybe homebrewed it. They work with a provider, a service provider, kind of like what we do with Anytime. It can be something like Traveling Mailbox. They have all of their own internal systems, and they're and so forth, and they're very large, but they have very limited locations that your mail is sent to. So there's just so many different variables. It's really hard to be able to create a comprehensive list and say, okay, well, how do you match all these things up? And the fees and that are so hard to match up. It's like lining holes in Swiss cheese. You're going to miss some things because it's really many things are subjective in service. So you think you're getting a really good deal by looking at the primary numbers, like letters received, number of pages per scan, a number of pages or fees per scan. But then there's all other ways that these services can make extra money that you're not considering until it's you're well down deep and committed to this with all your address changes and so forth. So yeah, it's really a tough one. It's really you really got to talk and call them and really understand. But the best way to do is referrals. People who actually use the service. Sometimes it is the forums and that you can say, "Hey, I use You can see a lot of Traveling Mailbox on the forums and stuff. And and if people aren't, I would say, if someone doesn't, we don't meet their needs or they're not looking at South Dakota, Traveling Mailbox, I'd recommend them. I think they're a good alternative.
Okay, that's good to know. It sounds like it could be pretty overwhelming because there's a lot of options
It
and
is.
price comparing and stuff.
And with that is why that's on my list of 4 things that I kind of thought of before this call. One of the 4 things is doing this well ahead of time, doing it 6 months before. People wait to the last week, and then they're like, their hair's on fire, and they're like, I'll just pick whatever I can. And then they pick a service, and then they're doing the virtual, e-notary, which is expensive, and they're just all getting it done really fast. And that is really a mistake. I'm saying 6 months. Most plans will give you 6 months, or I'm sorry, 30 to 60 days to try it out before you change all of your addresses. Give them a try. Try 1 or 2 addresses or whatever. Mail yourself a couple letters. See what happens.
Yeah.
I have a lot of people that mail themselves letters to test it and so forth. So 6 months I think, should be the minimum that people should be doing this to really make sure you get the right service. Because especially if you're looking at a strategy of you're changing your tax location, that's even more important to do it early rather than waiting as your last thing on your list and then just haphazardly pulling it all together before you leave.
Yeah, because it's a pain to kind of unravel it.
It
if you've
is.
already left.
It is a challenge to unravel. Yep.
Okay. But that makes sense. Give yourself plenty of time, send yourself a letter, see how it works, make sure there's no tricky pricing in anything, but just kind of become familiar with it before you start changing your bank and your credit card and
Absolutely.
tax stuff and everything. Yeah, that makes sense.
Hey, order yourself a couple cheap Amazon things, a cable or something. Just and see how fast it's received and what the process is what you're alerted. Send yourself a couple, maybe change one forwarding of one document that you receive on a regular basis and see how that goes, so forth, and really test it out, make sure it's what you want. Yep.
Yeah, that's good because you also want to see how the communication is.
That's a huge one. And, and I see that a lot from Expats Everywhere clients that when they connect with me and they say, hey, I'm with Expats Everywhere, blah blah blah, and they say, I don't want to use Anytime Mailbox. I don't want to use them because I've had a bad experience with them. And what I say to people is, someone who says that they've had a bad experience with Anytime Mailbox, we have a great relationship and we have a great experience with them. I highly recommend Anytime Mailbox as a platform. But think of Anytime Mailbox, and this goes with most of these providers that are a third party that provides the back end to then processing centers or mom and pop mail shops and so forth and pack and ship stores. they are as good as the service that's using them. Okay, so if you got bad communication with, I'll give you an example. This is really hard for me to explain here. It's worked way better in my head. Airbnb is a platform. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you find a place on Airbnb. They got beautiful pictures. The place is perfect, and it's a dream come true. You get there, and it's a dump, and there's there's infestation with cockroaches and stuff like that.
Ugh.
And you go to Airbnb and you say, hey, this wasn't what I expected it to be. And Airbnb, if they don't take your side and they refer back to the owner of the property, and the owner says, nope, it is what it is, you're gonna have to pay. Is that an Airbnb issue, or is that the owner of the property issue? It's going to be, and there's a lot of gray areas. I'm sure you've done Airbnbs where there's some gray issues where it's not very clear, but there was a service issue, there's a communication issue with the property owner. That's not an Airbnb. Airbnb is going to try to mitigate it, but ultimately it could be up to the property owner to make the final decision on that. And that's what the mail services, these platforms, the final decision of a refund or a return or a correction or a cancel a service can come down to the owner of the business, and the business may say, nope, it is what it is. So then it looks like it's the platform problem, but it's not a platform problem. It's the service, the provider of the service problem.
Okay. All right, good to know. That was a good analogy with Airbnb, because like, how many times have you walked up to a place and they say, just call when you're almost there, and you call and you're like, I can't get in, I'm literally standing outside the door. That's not an Airbnb thing. That's the property owner or manager.
It is. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So you mentioned 4 things, and we're going to move on to a few more. But before we do that, I want to mention a good thing also to help mitigate this mail thing is before you move as much stuff to electronic only, right, as you can, so that you're not getting some of the mail.
Yes, and a lot of people miss that, especially us and our later generations. We're so much into to mail and receiving mail and stuff like that. And on that really quick, one of the gotchas that I see a lot is when people wait to the last minute before they leave to change their mail. They do a forward all. They go to the USPS website. I forgot to change everything, like you said. I'm just going to do a forward all. And our 19-year-old daughter that just went to college, we're still getting a lot of her important mail, so I'm going to do a family forwarding. But the 26-year-old son that we really don't need to forward his mail, he's pretty much got it all on his own. I'm going to do a family because I can't just pick one of my family members. It's an all or none. And the next thing you know, your Spiegel catalog from 1997 that you never look at anymore is being forwarded to your mail service, and you're paying for them to receive it and scan it and post it onto your account.
Okay, yeah. So that ends up being so much more money.
Oh, yes, significantly more. And I advise anybody that comes to me with a plan to say, do not do USPS forwarding. Do that all, like you said, on your own. And once you make that clean cut to your new address, let all that junk go to that that Raiders of the Lost Ark warehouse in the end of the first movie, and where nobody will know where it goes and stuff. Because once you go to USPS and you do that forwarding, they alert all of the services and stuff that you got a new address. This is, and then they sell that. And they're notifying all of your Spiegel catalog from 1997 that, they got a new address. Now you need to forward it to this. And they sell those lists to other people. So you're just perpetuating this ugly mess. So yes.
Of junk mail. Yeah.
Don't do a USPS forward and get out to those key stuff and go to the e-billing and all that stuff, so you get as much as possible. Then you can go with a lower plan. You don't have to go with the mega plan because you do receive mail, but it's minimal mail.
Yeah. Saves money for sure.
Absolutely.
Now, what about for our listeners who are already abroad, who didn't set this up? Is there a way, at least through World Post, to go ahead and set it up now and try to test it out?
Absolutely.
Or is it difficult?
I mean, ironically, we have a lot of Portugal clients that didn't even come through Lusitano. It's kind of cool. But yeah, a lot of people who are already abroad. And we have a lot of people that actually are not U.S. citizens who want to get a presence in the U.S. for banking and so forth, that set it up and try it out. We send a lot of mail first class international to Europe, and it takes about a week, and we do it very, very affordable. And if people don't want tracking or don't need tracking, we can send credit cards to Germany, to Malta, to people when they get a U.S. credit card, and we've had zero problems yet so far. Austria is a little bit of a problem. When I've got a Gen Zer addressing the mail, I have to explain the difference between Austria and Australia.
Oh, that's a funny one.
And also with the Gen Zers, I had to actually I got a Gen Zer, awesome kid. He actually is IT, and he does mostly IT, but I have him processing mail, so he learns the processes. And I had to teach him how to address an envelope. I kid you not. He did the first one on his own, and he put the from and the to in the upper left-hand corner, and he put the stamp in the center of it.
How cute. Like, wow, the stamp in the center. That's so crazy. But yeah, that's definitely something to think about.
And I said, I'm never going to have you write a check for me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. How funny. It's stuff that we don't actually think about, right? Because some of these things are so old, not as necessary as they used to be. So,
right.
And I guess they're not teaching that in school these days.
I think with cursive, that's gone out the door. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Before we go too much into all of that funny stuff, let's go ahead and move on, because we've talked about, you've got some other things. Mm-hmm. You also mentioned South Dakota. So tell me about South Dakota and the perks of, are you talking about like people moving their residencies there before moving abroad?
Yeah. And that kind of falls under what on the four, kind of a subcategory of estate planning, LLC planning, structuring your finances, your whatever, however you also want to call it, many other things, where you have to look at what do you want as a tax address? Are you going to stay in the California tax system, or do you want to escape from the sticky states, and do you want to move to a more tax friendly state? A lot of people from California look at, in the West Coast, looking at kind of changing their tax residency from their home state to Texas, South Dakota, and sometimes Florida. So yeah, and so that's what South Dakota is one option, and I'm long on South Dakota as being the best. I mean, it's you grow
up. A little biased.
Yeah, I'm a little biased on that. I am. I would say it's a close Texas and is a close to Texas and South Dakota are pretty comparable. Florida is less for many reasons, but that would probably be a different episode. But yes, and really what it comes down to is where are your resources. If you have resources in Texas, family resources to use their residential address, go for Texas. I steer people to that all the time. I say South Dakota's, unless they have some other compelling reason, I say if you got family in South Dakota, and I get Lusitano clients, we have that conversation. Hey, I've got a sister lives in Houston. Do that. Use her residential address. You go make Texas your home. But if they don't have those connections, or if they don't want to involve friends or family, then South Dakota, in my opinion, is the best shot.
Yeah. Can you explain to listeners like why you would want to change your residency before moving abroad from a state like California?
The biggest thing is well, boy, that's really professionals are to do the strongest advisement on that. But it's mitigating and minimizing your tax liabilities and simplifying your tax liabilities. When you are, if you maintain your residency and your address and so forth in California, and you still have an income or a passive income or whatever, then you have to file income tax in California. And a lot of people say, well, you know what, I get my money back, because I'm not there. I don't physically live there. So I do have to file there, but I get my money back. So it's not that big of a deal. And my philosophy on that is why loan your money to the state? Why spend the time to have to file taxes in a state to get your money back? And in states like, in states like South Dakota, you don't even have to file. There's nothing, you don't even have to have money taken out of if you have an income, you don't even have to have that taken out of your W-2 because there's no state income tax.
Yeah, it's almost like if you're moving abroad, you can go through the quote unquote hassle of changing your residency just one time first up front, as opposed to every year having to go through the, again, quote unquote hassle of loaning your money out, even if you are getting it back. So which one do you want to do?
Yep.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree, especially these people that they may be residents of California, but they may have a home in Arizona. They may have other properties and so forth. Just change the residency to South Dakota. And with that, is also the importance of, if you are maintaining a property in the US for rentals or for income, for passive income, it is absolutely critical to look at changing an LLC or creating an LLC for that property, and mitigating your liability, your personal liability for that property by having an LLC. I see that happen all the time, where people, they're like, yeah, I got to do that. I should do that, but I'm just too busy. I'll do that after I move. And I would say the four things, the estate planning is probably, it's never done too late. It's just not done, period. It's just not done.
Oh,
People
okay,
just
yeah.
don't deal with it. And so it's not a thing that's done too late. It's just never, and especially once they move, it's like they're not going to deal with it. There are people that are very good at planning and looking ahead, and they understand trusts, they understand estates, and they understand LLCs, and they understand these things and how to mitigate their liabilities. An example of an issue with not mitigating your liabilities when you have a property that you're going to maintain for passive income in the US. I have a referral from a mail client, MAIL, that World Post client, that referred me to their friend who's moving international. They are getting ready to sell their house, but they weren't ready yet. So they had, and they're in the process of moving. They had a couple move into the basement, a fully furnished, separate exit basement that I think at one time they did it as an Airbnb, but then as they're moving abroad, they closed that down, but they wanted someone to kind of keep an eye on the property and maintain the yard and stuff as they go through the sale process. They move. This couple was referred by a friend to them, so they felt like it was a good, suggestion.
Trustable. Yeah,
Trustable. So they move, and then she's starting to get that Nextdoor app. She's starting to get Nextdoor notifications of a house in the neighborhood has been raided by the police. I'm not making this up. This really is happening right now. So there's a house in the neighborhood getting raided by the police. Like, as it was happening, a neighbor was reporting to the Nextdoor app that there's a house being. So she goes and looks, and it's her house.
It's her house. Oh my gosh! What was going on in that house that it was being raided by the police?
So the neighbor who saw all this happening, and they noticed that the police were carrying out electronic equipment. And she asked, "What's going on?" And the police says, "Oh, we've got a child pornography investigation here."
Oh my gosh!
And this is
awful.
A family neighborhood. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it comes to that. I guess it comes down to this couple that were living in the basement. One of them was downloading allegedly accused of downloading child pornography. They had a 90-day exit on the lease for them, and they exercised that 90-day exit, and they refused. Nope, they got a lawyer. They said, we're not moving, because they got a really good deal on the rent because they were watching the property, and managing the property. So after $20,000 of legal fees,
oh my,
she finally gave up. Because what they were doing then is trying to, their lawyer said, I'm an employee because I've been managing your property, and I need a salary, I need this. And so there's like $40,000 worth of employee fees or whatever that they were trying to claim. The lawyer just mucked the whole thing up. And I was saying to her, I'm like, you got to be careful, because this is in a cold climate state. They can slip and fall outside, and you're liable for that. If that's going to be, because the thing, and they wouldn't allow contractors to come in and do the work. They so this and she was paying all the utilities this whole time. The lawyer said you cannot collect rent from them anymore, because if you collect rent, that means that you're still agreeing for them to rent there. So she hadn't been collecting rent for months. $20,000 in legal fees, the potential liability of if there's an accident. And all of this is on her shoulders, because the house is in her name. And so
that's so terrible.
It has been an absolute nightmare for her. So I mean, these things that having an LLC will mitigate some of those. I mean, it won't eliminate this problem, but it will mitigate them to the fact that you are not liable for all your own personal assets. So
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, obviously that's a I wouldn't say it's an extreme example, but I mean, it could happen, right? It could happen to anyone.
It can.
So.
Yeah, this is an extreme. I mean, I know many people that have had good luck and been fortunate and great renters and stuff like that. But I mean, you got to prepare for the worst case scenario, because when you're abroad, in time zones and so forth, and dealing with lawyers as you're in your time zone at 6 to 8 hours difference and stuff, it can be a logistical nightmare. So I guess you always have to prepare for the worst, but hope for the best.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so then going back to South Dakota, if you're setting all these things up in South Dakota, what's the process like for someone who wants to do that?
It's actually very easy. South Dakota, to set up with the Secretary of State and set up an LLC or to do your trust, it's very simple. I do advise people to we can provide basic guidance on it, but really they should seek the advice of their professionals, their CPAs and their lawyers to create a trust and simple trusts or so forth. And then if they want to do the LLC structure as well, South Dakota is very good, and especially it depends on where your property is, of course, and how you have to mix all that. You may have to register in that state where your rental property is. But creating creating LLCs in South Dakota, let's say if you're an influencer, or you're going to be, you provide virtual professional services, setting up an LLC in South Dakota is super simple and so much less expensive than doing California is like, I don't know, $350, $450 a month or a year or something like that. Whereas it's $150 for the first filing and then $50 for the renewals in South Dakota. Okay. And another thing on that subject, I just was alerted by one of my clients. They have an LLC in Oregon, and they just got hit with this healthcare for everybody bill of $1,000 just because they have this corporation in the state of Oregon. I could be wrong on the 1,000, but it was significant. And he has to, because he has a corporation there, he has to pay it.
Yeah.
So people
okay.
really
So some sort of law that came through that you have to give some health care to employees or something.
It was for universal health care within the Oregon state health care something.
Yeah.
It's not mandated for your employees, but something like that. And he was like, wow, man, I got to get out of this state.
Yeah, it's true. It's stuff that you don't think of, like whether it's, that, or even as simple as like just changing your residency and changing your driver's license so that you have it to South Dakota, and the perks that could happen.
Yeah. And that's another thing too. That's another reason. Thanks for that, because you've asked that question. I was deviated a little bit. Changing residency to South Dakota is so simple. Some people think it's like criminal. And I laugh at that when people say, you can't do that. That's illegal. To change your residency to South Dakota, you have to stay there one night and get a driver's license or a state ID, and have a private mailbox service, a mail forwarding service. That's all you need. Okay. One night, private mailbox service, and you're a resident.
Okay. Yeah, so it's really easy. Even if you don't have like an LLC or your own company, but you want to go ahead and just have your residency in South Dakota for other tax purposes or whatever it might be.
Convenience.
Because you can set up the virtual mailbox. Yeah.
Yep.
Can you do this from abroad if you've already left?
No, you have to physically be there for one night.
Okay, so if someone has been abroad for a couple of years and they're getting hit with certain things and they decide I want to change it, they'll have to fly back, physically be in South Dakota for a night or a couple days.
One night.
Explore South Dakota a little bit.
Yep, I encourage that, but yes.
Yeah. Maybe go in the summer, not the winter.
Exactly. Yes. Definitely. Yes.
And so you could do it if you've already moved, but you would have to physically go back to the States to go through the process.
We do have a few that do that. Either they drive through on a road trip or they fly through. They're in Sioux Falls where our office is. It's a reasonably nice sized regional hub. So there's quite a few larger flights going through there that aren't really, really, too expensive. And actually people could use their miles and stuff and they pass through. Back to your point, we encourage people to stay 2 nights and just kind of support the community a little bit. We got these turn and burn people that will come in at like 11 p.m. on a Thursday night. They're at the DMV at 7 a.m. Friday morning, and they're on 11 a.m. flight back to wherever. It's possible, but we just when people do that, they're kind of giving the rest of people, the South Dakotans they're getting a little restless with people doing that and just not really contributing to the community or to the economy. other than this their mailbox. And so I encourage people to just spend a couple days there.
Yeah, of course. It's a little mini vacation.
It is.
You know?
And so in Sioux
Check out the
Falls,
area.
it's like a mini, I don't know what you'd call it, a mini Austin. You know, it's a very, it's a very eclectic. It's got lots of great restaurants and entertainment and so forth.
Great. Okay, so before we move on to another point of what to do before and things you don't know that you need to do, anything else in the estate planning that you had thought of that would be good? I mean, you talk about trusts. Some people talk about wills, but you recommend more of a trust.
Oh my gosh, let's talk about wills.
Don't go too much into it, huh?
Okay, let me just say this. Again, I'm not an expert here. I don't write wills, but I got a lot of people that are coming in for trusts to World Post, and a lot of people traveling international, but also the people in the U.S. People die. Trusts live forever. People die. Trusts live forever. If you're counting on a will to take care of everything, it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be complex for family members, the probate and stuff like that. I'm just dealing with a vehicle registration for somebody, and it's all about the probate and stuff like that. And had that been in a trust, it'd have been done and done. Trusts live forever. People die. When I see these posts on these international forums, especially the Portugal ones, someone saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a Portugal advogado to convert my U.S. will to a Portuguese will," I just want to climb through my computer and just shake them.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Yeah. They need a will. I'm sorry, they need a trust. They need a trust and not a will. They need a trust. Yeah, and just get out of this will thing. And if you don't know the difference, you really do need to. And I see a lot of, Kalie, is a lot of people who, they bought a house in Southern California in 1975, and they paid $25,000 for it, and they've kept it up for years. They paid it off. Now it's worth 2.5 million. They sell it. They move to Portugal. They're millionaires, and they've never had that mentality, that lifestyle of feeling like they don't understand the importance and the significance of an LLC, a trust, estate planning and estate management. They just don't understand it because they've been, maybe they worked, as a professional, whatever, or as a school teacher or whatever all their life, and they never really were in that mindset of doing that. And so they're the ones that aren't like really planning and thinking about, oh, it's going to be too expensive to set this up, and oh, I don't know how to deal with this. And if you do your research, if you have time to do it, it is not that expensive. People think it's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars. And if you do your research and you get referrals from people that know what they've experienced it themselves, you can do it for a very affordable rate.
Okay. Good. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to a little more of the communication side of things. Like we were talking about forwarding your mail, but what about, a big thing that comes up is like, how can I access like two-step authentication or keeping in touch with family and friends back in the States when I move? So what are some things that you're seeing in the realm of communication?
Okay, so being kind of like a tech enthusiast myself, I'm a self-proclaimed tech enthusiast. Comms are critical, and that is one of the things that people wait till the very last minute to do. When I say comms is texting people, we call it texting in the US and in Europe they call it SMS. But understanding what iMessage is and how a blue bubble and a green bubble, the difference between the two, and how if you do not set up things and if you're not really into WhatsApp, many Americans, it's like they don't use WhatsApp like we do. They're new to it, or they associate it to their U.S. number. They cancel their U.S. number and they continue to use that number in their WhatsApp. They're a year into being in Portugal, and all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore. And some goob in the U.S. starts getting all of your friends' messages like, "Hey, John, where are you? You're not answering your messages." And then that goob is a smart aleck and says, "Hey, I'm John." They pretend to be John, and you're having a conversation with someone you don't even know. So those things are really important. And I mean, again, to get into those, that would be a whole hour conversation, but it's really important. No less than 3 months before you leave, figure out a WhatsApp plan. Figure out, are you going to move your number over to a virtual system like Google Voice or something else? Are you going to keep your Verizon everything plan that's $450 a year and your 32-year-old daughter is still on it because it's the family plan and they're saving money? You've got to think about those things, because if you don't, and you move abroad, if you're assuming your service is going to continue to work, and 3 days before you leave, when you're in that hair on fire mode, you go to the Verizon store, and some pimple-faced 18-year-old tells you, yeah, you're good, man. You're good. You continue to use this plan. And then you move abroad, and 30 days later, it's canceled because you've been roaming for too long, or it doesn't work. You really, it's best to.
It's stressful.
I see that happen so many times, Kalie, where people lose their phone number once they move. They lose it.
Yeah.
And then they try to port it over to something else, and they're not receiving the authentication texts because of the SIM swapping issues. So they're trying to port it, but they can't because they're not receiving their texts abroad to verify that they're the owner of that. They're in physical possession of that number at that time, and they end up losing their number. And Americans, we are attached to our phone numbers. We identify. I mean, there are so many people I know. I mean, their phone numbers have lasted longer than 12 jobs and 3 marriages. And they, and they have that phone number. And they're proud of it. I've had my cell phone since my first cell phone that I had in 1997. I got the same number.
Yeah, it is something that's interesting. Like, we get asked that a lot. I mean, we've been abroad for quite a while, and we haven't had a U.S. number like that in a really long time. But it is something that people seem to be very attached to. And there's so many services nowadays that you don't have to keep that same number.
No.
I think they're afraid that they're just going to lose contact with people, or someone really important that they haven't talked to in 20 years or something is going to need to reach out to them. But it's nowadays we live in a world where you can figure that out and people can get in touch with you.
Yep.
So for us, when we travel, well, obviously we have a Portuguese number, which is good all throughout Europe. But when we leave, so even when we go back to the States, for example, for a trip, we just use Airlo, which is an eSIM service that you can turn off and on. You can switch it. It's very easy. But another one that I've recently come across that I think is a good shout out for people who do want to keep their number or want some options is, have you heard of the website Tossable Digits?
Mm-mm.
Yep. Yeah, so this is another one that I was recently came across from someone who I'm a technical editor on a book that's coming out about about moving abroad, and she threw it out in there, and I thought, oh, that's a good one. So I mean, listener, if you want to take a look at Tossable Digits, that's another way of doing it. But generally, I recommend don't keep your Verizon, AT&T. That plan is so expensive, and I do think that nowadays, I think Verizon and these big companies in the U.S. have become privy to hey, we're losing people because we're charging too much. Yep. So I think they're trying some little things, but they're still not affordable options. They're still not good options. So if you can come to grips, especially with losing your US number, that's the most affordable way of doing it. But
and even these apps and services you're referring to, even if you want to maintain your number, let's say your professional services, your doctor, whatever, or if you have a family member that is an early boomer or a late boomer, and they only can communicate on their
flip phone or landline.
Or their landline, but and they don't know how to add phone numbers to it, and so it has to be in the memory that you programmed, that you have to show them, push this button to call me. And you want to keep a number. Porting it is where with these services, and asking if you can port, how much it is, but getting that done well ahead of before you move. Again, not in that hair on fire mode, and testing it.
Test it, yeah.
Because once you go virtual, there are some things will not work. Of course, the communication is fine, but many things will not work with the SMS authentication codes and stuff like that. Some banks will block them, and there's a couple different technical, nitty-gritties on that without getting into the details of that. But some services for security, they say, no, we don't support virtual numbers. They know if it's virtual or not, and they don't support them because of the fraud issues. And so you need to know, if that is going to work or not. The lag sometimes in virtual services, when you have to do an authentication, they say, okay, push this number for your birth date, and it doesn't recognize them. It could be, so you got to test all these things out well before, and 3 to 6 months is important to start testing these out. And another thing too is getting used to picking up your phone on one of these applications rather than on your regular phone ringing. It's an app ringing. And learning how to, set up the voicemail and how to answer things, how to make phone calls from there. calling your services that you may need to call, your US based services when you're abroad, making sure they work. It is kind of cool, Kalie. I'm sure you agree that like we can be on the other side of the world. We're talking to some government agent, government service, as if they're right next door to us. It's pretty cool, and
Yeah.
so
Definitely.
all these things in finding these apps and making sure they work properly is really critical to do well before you leave.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Well, so one thing you were talking about, like the thing that kills me is the two-step authentication. And like, there's so many like banks and credit cards that won't allow whether like a number from abroad or one of these virtual ones, which drives me crazy. So I set out to look like, who are the banks, who are the credit cards that at least allow for authentication through an email address, which is like, hello, now we're in 2025. How are there not more large entities like this that will allow it? Because people are mobile, people leave, they go places. So what I've done personally is I've just gone and I've changed like banks and credit cards and stuff to the ones who are on it and who allow at least so I don't have any issues with the phone number.
And that kind of falls under the banking, but they mesh together. That's one of the four on home banking. But yes, that's very critical, Kalie. That's a very good point to make, because what people don't know is, what the authenticator apps are, right? For authentication, it's like the Google Authenticator. Those are the ones you want to gravitate towards, because those, when you can authenticate through one of those apps, the threshold of fraud is so low. I don't know if they'd be high or low. The risk of fraud is so low because they can definitely know it's you because you're using the authenticator app. And that code you're putting in is definitely you versus an email or maybe an SMS code. And so you have many less risks of getting your account locked or flagged for fraud because you have set up that authentication app and it works. And what you will find is many regional banks and many credit unions will actually support authenticator codes. And you can actually enable them. And again, you don't want to enable them when you're across the world. You want to enable them when you're home. So if you have any issues and you have to go into the bank to re-authenticate yourself, you can do that. But the big banks like Chase Me Away and Capital One, and just don't get me going on Wells Fargo. How low Wells Fargo?
Oh, they're the worst.
They're the worst.
They're the worst.
And
they're the worst.
And maybe they are now. I don't know, because I have run away from those banks, but the bigger ones, they have a slower adoption rate, to these authenticator apps. It seems like the regional banks and stuff are more adaptive, kind of the greenfield. If anybody wants to know what greenfield is, look it up. ChatGPT it or Wikipedia it. They're more nimble, they're smaller, and they're able to then adopt these newer technologies that are far better. And not only that, but it mitigates your risk of your bank account being hacked. By using an authenticator app versus SMS, SIM swapping, and so forth.
Definitely.
And a lot of people, I've seen situations where they test it out and it works. Getting the SMS code to their Google Voice or whatever. Well, a year later, 2 years later, maybe Chase Me Away has changed their platform or their rules, and it no longer works.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I know. I have a big beef with Bank of America. I got rid of them because I'm like, how can we how are you not able to function for people who go, like, even if it's for travel, you have to access something. And so we ended up going with a smaller, more regional bank because they were a lot friendlier to being abroad. It's crazy,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Skank of America, by the way, that's who they are.
Skank of America. You got names for everything. Okay, so then is banking then your last one that you wanted to chat about today?
Let me look to see if there's anything else. I think comms is good. We beat that to death. I do want to make one more comment about comms and banking. I do find it funny when people move to Portugal and they're in an uproar complaining about the banking fees in Portugal. Because we're so used to everything being free in America. They're in an uproar with the banking fees in Portugal, and then they keep their U.S. number on their Verizon plan, so they get their SMS codes for when they go to their Chase account. And they're spending $70 a month so they can keep that number.
Just to have that number.
Just to have that. And it's like, okay. But no, I think that's.
No, yeah, you really should. Yeah, if someone's trying to consider where I should spend my money, they should actually just write it down and say, okay, yeah, to keep my Verizon, it's going to cost this much per month. Sure. To have this, it's going to cost this much, a bank, blah, blah, blah. And then see where you can cut that stuff out and where you could use alternatives that are free or at least cheaper. But this is why it's really important to do it well before you go.
Absolutely.
Or then if you're already abroad, once you have a bit of time back in the States where you're going to be back for a little bit, and you can set and test these things before then heading back out.
Yep. Great time when you're visiting friends and family. Yep.
Yeah. Fun stuff. Okay. So then we've already touched a little bit on banking, but like I was saying before, I definitely I set out to find the banks for us that would work, that we didn't have to deal with the issues of not being able to receive communication from them because they just were unwilling to do something like a foreign phone number or an authenticator or something like that. And you're right, it's the smaller banks that seem to be much better at it than Bank of America, Wells Fargo, or transferring money. We'll get to transferring money. But
yes, that's on my list.
Okay, so let's chat about this last one and go with banking. What can our listeners be doing now before they leave to go abroad for banking?
I'd say minimum 3 months. With the banking, there's a few things. Back to your point, I say, and I said this in the 3 pillars. KYB, you know what KYC is? Know your customer. Okay, in reverse, KYB, know your banker. If your banker is Robert in the Philippines or Susie in India that has no clue how to help you, you're in trouble when you're international and you have a big issue to deal with. You need to go to your bank. You need to have at least, if you want to stay with the bigs, fine, but add to your portfolio of banking a regional bank or credit union. Go in and get to know the banker. Who is my primary contact? Who can I call in banking hours to deal with an issue on a SWIFT transfer or a wire transfer, or flagged I'm stuck in, I can't get out of, I can't get into my online banking. If you have a name and you have their number and their email, you are way ahead of the 8 ball when you run into issues. And they're going to be invested in your story. They're going to want to help you, and they're going to be a resource, your lifeline because the critical thing is you're getting access to your money and moving it. With that, people really need to understand all the different terminologies in banking. And this crosses over to even on the international side, the European side. They need to understand the difference between a wire transfer, a SWIFT transfer, an ACH, Zelle. How can I get money moved around between friends and family? How can I get money moved around between my other bank accounts? Because I may need to pull money from one account to another in an urgent fashion. How am I going to do that? If you just rely on ACH, that could be 2 business days. Yeah. And so understanding and talking to your banker and saying, okay, I need to do a same day wire transfer. What is the process? Oh, well, you need to apply to, you need to contact me, provide this information on this specific app or this secure platform to give me the instructions. Every bank is different, and a lot of it is more of a manual process. And so you need to understand that before you need it and before you're abroad. And so getting to know your bank, working with, like as you said, I cannot stress enough having a regional bank or credit union, in your quiver of banking solutions, and having that down is very important. And with that too, it's very important if you have Wise, how are you going to get money to the U.S.? The having Wise set up and working is critical, and you really understand not just setting it up, but actually using it, aging it, like I say, like a fine port wine. Start getting money moved into it, setting up your connection to your U.S. bank account and doing pulls and pushes, kind of thinking in your head, or creating like a crime scene investigation map of all your financial connections and little strings of, pointing to all of them, and making sure all your pathways are set up properly. And so you can think, at least in your head, what are all the variables I need to consider for moving money around? If I've got my, a lot of people do they do the, what's the financial, I would say, escape me right now. They like the card from the one investment bank that everybody likes to use, and getting that connected to local banks and stuff like that. So all those are very critical with the banking. And then on the PT side, it's really critical. A lot of people, what they do is they their banking set up in Portugal. This is kind of specific to Portugal here now. And they just let it sit and they don't really do anything with it. And they rely everything on their Charles Schwab card. Everything they do is on their Charles Schwab. They need to learn SEPA, IBAN, NIB, instant transfer, direct debit. They need to go into the app and learn how to pay a bill, how to use the app to take a picture of the entidad. You know this stuff, right? The entity.
Yeah, of course. It's actually in Portugal. It's quite easy.
Oh my gosh!
If you know how it works, it's nice how easy it is.
It is. In fact, and the nice thing about it is, if you know how it works in Portugal, you know how it works all through Europe. And really, the banking in Europe is it's a godsend. They because of the EU, and I imagine this is with the creation of the EU, they had this opportunity, this greenfield opportunity to create a system in Europe where every account number is unique, and and it's the same format. It's a actual standard, and by looking at that code what country it's from, the bank account number. Which country it's from and what bank. Just looking at the first two letters and the first four numbers, what bank and what country. And that's all through Europe. And understanding that and how to do that is really, really critical. Pay if you got a bill, if you got your your Vodafone bill, don't put it on direct debit right away. Pay a couple of them manually.
See how it works.
See how it works. MBWay, learning how to use MBWay is critical too. Everybody uses it. You get MBWay all the time now. How that works and how, and the multibanco, how the multibanco works when you do the entity, the reference code and the amount, how those things work is really critical.
Yes. I think one thing too is you need to go into your bank and find out what your limit is as far as how much you can transfer online versus having to go into a branch in person. Because I know people get stuck on this. You move abroad and then you've sold your house, for example, and you move abroad and then eventually you want that money over in Europe to buy a house or whatever it might be. And it's like, this is where I do not like Wells Fargo, is because of the caps. Like even like a business account with Wells Fargo has like a ridiculously low cap that you can't do online. You have to go into the branch. So I know people who have been stuck where they have the money sitting in their US account and now they're ready to purchase. And they're like, we're not moving that amount of money like ever. So you actually have to, I know someone who had to fly back to the US to walk into the branch to do that. And so just knowing what your bank allows you to do with your own money, which is crazy, how much you can move and everything. And then also the alternatives of like where you can put it while you wait. So for example, this is where we like a company like Spartan FX, because you open an account with them, you have your US money, and before you go, you can go into the branch, you can put it into your account in Spartan FX. It can stay in USD if you want, because then you can also time the exchange it to euro when you have a good exchange rate. And then it's so much faster when you're ready to actually purchase to access your money. So it's little things like this that you really got to know about doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's very key too. And thank you for bringing up Spartan FX, because I highly recommend them. A lot of people, they say, well, my conversion fees and stuff with my big US bank is cheaper. And I'm like, you aren't seeing the whole picture here. You're just looking at one little piece of this whole big picture. And this may be, but you're not looking at conversions. And then I had someone said, my bank, it's the fee to transfer international is cheaper than, let's say, whether it was Spartan or whether it was Wise. And it's like, and then they went through the process like, oh, wait a minute, but the conversion really sucked.
It's terrible. Yes. I always recommend do not go from your US bank to your European bank, because they give you a terrible exchange. So they might say free transfers, and it sounds so nice, but no, they're getting their money. So this is where I like, on a smaller amount, Wise is good, and on a bigger amount, Spartan FX is good. These companies, you just need to know about.
Yep. And then back to the learning how I've learned even Wise, the fastest to do ACH with Wise, like over 500 or so. It all depends on your relationship with Wise, because you got to age that you got to build a reputation with them. But over 500, they may slow down the process just to make sure it's not fraud. And you can, and that is through ACH, but you can actually have your US debit card to do 500, 1,000, and they'll do it instantly. And if you need something moved fast, let's say a car purchase or a car repair or something like that, you can do it in a debit card, reasonably not that expensive, for just a few dollars, up to about $2,000. It's reasonable. It's within the realm of reasonable fees to do that. considering the convenience versus waiting or doing some other type of transfer where it's going to take longer. I had a client who paid through Spartan, and I was a little concerned because I've not had good luck with Swift. And they did a Swift transfer through Spartan, and I'm like, okay, this is going to take 3-4 days, and it was same day.
Mm-hmm.
I was really impressed. So
Spartan
I don't know.
knows what's up.
Yeah, I think that's partially Spartan, but because Swift is not Swift. It is not Swift. And so that could be part of it would be Spartan. But two, back to your point, is this client had a lot of money sitting in Spartan because they were buying a property near Porto and Gia, and they were waiting for their agent or their whoever you want to call it, their account manager was waiting for the conversions to look better, and with the dollar was getting stronger, and they were making a significant transfer, and they waited till right at the end, and they made a significant larger savings on the conversion by waiting and having Spartan work with them on it.
It's a big perk to have someone doing that for you and tracking it.
Yeah, and if you got your Wells Fargo guy that just created 300 fake accounts, so he's got good numbers, tell you, now's a good time to transfer. Good luck with that.
Yeah, right. I know. Okay, Dallas, any final thoughts or advice for our listeners today?
I would just like to say a little bit of who I like to work with my clients. I love solving problems. I love working. I've really, really enjoyed on the World Post side, going from a more international, working with clients. And I would say my favorite clients that I like to work with are in this very small window between analysis paralysis and hair on fire.
Mm-hmm.
There is this window where people are, hey, I'm going to be moving at this period of time. I need a strategy. I need a plan. Where do I do? What do I love working with those people. The analysis paralysis people who have to just like have absolute assurance on every different variable of their move, and they need definitive answers by professionals, on their other tax liabilities when they sell their house in the U.S. and before they move to Portugal, and their NHR and all that. They need absolute definitive answers, and they're going to just analyze it to death. They wear me down. They wear me down.
Yeah.
And then the hair on fire people that I'm moving next week. I need this. I need this. I need this. I need this. Those people in the middle that are moving forward on a reasonable timeline and I love working with them. They're great.
Yep. So give yourself time.
Give yourself
less
time.
Stressful for everyone. Yeah. Well, thank you, Dallas. And listener, if anyone would like to unpack this a little more, talk about your own situation, then I do consultations, so you can book a call with me. And you could obviously email me at info@expatseverywhere.com if you want to get in touch with Dallas or just talk about any of these recommendations that we've given today. Dallas, thank you. I'm sure we'll have you back on another time.
Okay. Peace out.